The goal of this video is simply to share information that I have compiled to help me understand the issues being discussed and being debated within the United Methodist Church. The goal is not to convince you or persuade you as to which side of the debate you should believe. It is simply a way to help clarify and to demystify the issues being discussed in order to help you draw your own conclusions. I'd also like to clarify that this is a working copy, so I continue to develop and update this as I find good, reliable, and relevant source information. So it is still under development, although I don't see any drastic changes being made to it in the future. I decided on my own to start compiling this information and gathering data sources. Eventually, I was able to put it into its current form, and it has drawn interest from folks within my own church, and I've been able to present this information to them. This is a file that I just created in Evernote, and it's available by going to https://bit.ly/hopeumc discussion. All one word, and I'll put that up on the screen. So this is just kind of the way that I process information by gathering information and kind of distilling it into a way that I can understand it. So the first thing that I did was I created a situation statement to kind of provide an overview. So this statement is one that this situation is one that I crafted myself. And it states, a new Methodist denomination, the Global Methodist Church, has been formed in response to dissatisfaction on issues being addressed within the United Methodist Church. The Global Methodist Church is being presented as a more traditional denomination of the Methodist movement. The GMC joins an established list of other Wesleyan Methodist denominations that profess to adhere to traditional principles which fall along different points of the theological liberal or conservative continuum. Theological liberalism and theological conservatism should not be conflated with political parties or platforms. The Liberation Methodist Connection is an attempt of more progressive Methodists to start a denomination of like-minded peoples. The cancellation of the UMC's 2020 General Conference, which occurs every 4 years, until 2024 has prompted several UMC churches to initiate disaffiliation from the UMC in favor of the GMC due to unresolved concerns. One high-profile issue relates to the enforcement of established policies and restrictions regarding homosexuality. So within that statement, there are a couple of hyperlinks. Throughout this document, you'll see several hyperlinks. Some of them go to videos, some go to blog posts, articles that were written as a way to cite sources, information that I was able to derive some of the things that I'm stating in here. One of which, and it's used several times, is a gentleman that runs a site called Ready to Harvest. So this first one, where it says New Methodist Denomination, if you click on that, it'll open his page here.
Methodists find their origin in the teaching of John Wesley and his companions like his brother Charles and his friend George Whitefield, all of who are part of the Church of England. Their teaching, originally just a movement within Anglicanism, split into a separate denomination after John Wesley's death.
So that's one example of, and you can continue to watch that, but there are several of his videos. So his videos are referenced throughout. Others are just websites. So this is the Liberation Methodist Connection that goes to their website. And then this is a YouTube video that explains the difference between theological liberalism and theological conservatism. Again, not to be confused with political parties, just as when the creed is read and it says we believe in the Catholic Church, Catholic small c, it means something different than Catholic, the large c, as in the Catholic denomination. The 2024 General Conference is still scheduled to meet, and in my understanding, again, these are just my words, I think that there are 3 potential outcomes that could come from that conference. Number one is that the UMC can reaffirm that the Book of Discipline language, the language that was voted upon in 2019, to retain traditional values. So if that vote occurs and it passes, it's possible that the UMC will remain a single denomination. But there's an enforcement issue of the denomination that would need to be resolved, and extreme progressive groups could likely leave and form a new denomination, such as the Liberation Methodist Connection that's currently being looked at. The second scenario is that the UMC could remove this incompatible language, and I use the word incompatible in quotes, and I'll explain that later because that term is actually used in the language. So that's how I'm referencing that paragraph. So the UMC could remove that incompatible language from the Book of Discipline, which is seen as offensive by some. This could allow churches to self-govern their stance on homosexuality within that church. It could still remain a single denomination, but more of the traditionalists could leave for another denomination, such as the Global Methodist Church. Scenario number 3 is that the UMC could vote to divide into 2 separate denominations, one a more traditional and one a more progressive. And that's a point of clarification. The GMC is not a split of the UMC. The GMC is a group of churches that have decided to leave the UMC and go start a new denomination. So they have split from the UMC, but it is not the result of a split of the UMC. It's important to understand that distinction. So next, we're going to look at the problem that is created. Again, a problem statement that I crafted myself. UMC churches feel pressure to determine whether they wish to remain affiliated with the UMC, leave the UMC for another denomination, such as the Global Methodist or the Free Methodist, etc., or become an independent church within a specific window of time in order to do so under more favorable disaffiliation terms. So the feel pressure there, you see that's hyperlinked, and that goes to a video where the treasurer or the former treasurer of the Dakotas UMC annual conference walked through the timeline if a church wishes to leave, what that timeline might look like in order to meet the Book of Discipline's provision that expires on December 31st of 2023. The timeline itself isn't relevant because our annual conference has decided to hold special sessions in December to address disaffiliation requests. So that does change the timeline that this individual in that video goes through. However, it doesn't change the fact that some churches need to follow a timeline if they wish to utilize that provision that expires at the end of the year. Some assumptions to keep in mind. So these are just things that, as I presented, I'd like for folks to keep in mind. Number 1, I just like this quote from attorney Rick Hogue: reasonable minds can differ. The second thing to keep in mind is unsubstantiated and exaggerated claims will be made by outside parties on either or both sides of the debate with the intent of sparking fear and emotional reaction. All right, so there are claims such as that the UMC is eventually going to not believe in Jesus anymore. You can be a Buddhist and you don't have to believe in you don't have to believe in the Bible. You can believe anything that you want and you can come to a UMC church. So what they're doing is they're trying to paint the UMC basically as a Unitarian Universalist church. And I've linked to a video that explains what a Unitarian Universalist church believes. So they're trying to spark some fear into people to say, hey, this is what the UMC is going to become. Another thing that I ask people to do is to understand that within our church, all members of our church are loved, respected, and appreciated for their beliefs, regardless of the position that they hold on these issues. And I ask them or invite them to state this with me, that I promise to treat everyone within my church family with respect and kindness as we discuss Highland Hope's future, knowing these discussions can be uncomfortable. And I will not be guided by emotion, rather by our love of God and love for each other. So then I present a little bit of a history lesson here, and this was a screenshot that I grabbed from, once again, Ready to Harvest, that he provided in one of his videos. And this shows kind of, a broad history of the Methodist Church movement. So 1784 is when the Methodist Church, the Methodist Episcopal Church, was created. And 60 years later, 1841, the Wesleyan Methodist Church splits from the Methodist Episcopal Church. 1844, the Methodist Episcopal Church South is created. It's a split from the Methodist Episcopal Church regarding slavery, some issues there regarding slavery. 1861, the Free Methodist Church splits from the main church to form a new denomination. And then in 1939, the Methodist Episcopal Church rejoins. So the South and the North churches rejoin into a single church. So the Methodist Church is then created. In 1946, the Evangelical Methodist Church is created. And then in 1968, I think it's the Evangelical Brotherhood joins with the Methodist Church to form the United Methodist Church. That same year, over on the Wesleyan side, the Pilgrim Holiness Church combined with the Wesleyan Methodist Church to create the Wesleyan Church. That same year, a group of churches said, "We're not crazy about the governance system that you've developed, and we think you're getting a little too liberal for us, so we're going to split off and create our own denomination, the Bible Methodist Connection." And then we come down, and in 2022, a group of churches said to the United Methodist Church, "We don't like the governance structure that you've created, and we think you're getting a little too liberal for us, so we're going to leave and start our own denomination, and we're going to call that the Global Methodist Church." So with that, I created a table, and the coloring kind of correlates back up to that chart, so you can follow along. The first row of the table defines which church we're talking about, which denomination we're talking about, and each one of these are hyperlinked to a Ready to Harvest video where he explains the history and some of the theological beliefs that they have, as well as policy and procedural type tenets of the denomination. So you can watch each of those videos to understand more. I have their websites, their official websites listed there. And then under that is a link to their individual specific book of discipline, where that's their official document where they explain the denomination and what they believe. So between the Ready to Harvest videos and the book of discipline, that information is primarily the source documents for this table. So when we look at things such as homosexual worshipers, are they welcome in the church? If you look through the book of discipline, the Free Methodist Church, the United Methodist Church are very welcoming in their language. The other denominations say we welcome everyone, however, you likely won't become a member because of if you're a practicing homosexual. Okay. And I say questionable for the Global Methodist Church. I don't find it in their book of discipline, but I have a video linked towards the bottom where 2 interviews were done. One from the interviewer talked to someone representing the UMC, and then the same interviewer talked to someone representing the GMC. And in that interview for the GMC, he was asked whether or not homosexuals would be welcome and could be members. And the answer that he gave, and I'm very much paraphrasing it, was along the lines of, "We're going to ask you to profess certain statements upon membership. And if you're a practicing homosexual, it's unlikely you would be able to profess these statements. So it's unlikely that you would become a member of the church." So So that's why I say questionable on there, because I don't have it in writing, but I'm just going off of his answer to that question. The next line there, homosexual clergy and homosexual marriage, across the board, all of them, that goes against their book of discipline and their policy. And I have asterisks next to the word no for UMC because, and this is one of the issues that are being discussed, there are a small number of churches where self-professing homosexuals are being allowed to remain clergy, and there are some churches where homosexual weddings have been conducted. So although the book of discipline restricts that, there are some churches that have gone against the book of discipline. Okay, and that is leading to some of the issue as to enforcement of the book of discipline and what kind of consequences will violators be held to. Going down the chart, just kind of quickly, there are some of the denominations that say only clergy that have gone through a biblical divorce due to having a spouse that was unfaithful would be allowed to remain as clergy. The United Methodist does not have a restriction, nor are there any restrictions for the Global Methodist that I can find. But the other Methodists do have restrictions regarding clergy if they were if their divorce was not of a biblical nature. Many denominations view a divorce that isn't on biblical terms as a form of adultery, which is sexual immorality. Regarding conservative dress, you can see across there, the first few are silent on it. The Bible Methodist Church has very prescriptive language in their book of discipline as to how people should dress, and the Wesleyan Church basically only says modesty. Trust clause, and you can read more about what a trust clause is if you're unfamiliar, but here's the information as to who enforces a trust clause and who doesn't, connectional and governance structure, how apportionments work, and we'll get a little bit more into apportionments, how clergy are assigned, the size of the churches. Okay, so the United Methodist Church by far is the largest denomination within the Wesleyan tradition. Major doctrines and baptism, how they do communion, Bible inerrancy. Again, there's a video that explains what it means, in terms of Bible inerrancy doctrine, and this may not be a big deal. The bottom line here is that each of these denominations have a statement in their book of discipline regarding the inerrancy of the Bible. The UMC and the GMC do not have an official statement, but they do talk about how they view the Bible, and you may read that statement and say, yeah, it's the Word of God. They're saying it right here. So it may not be a big deal, but the point is that the Book of Discipline does not have an official inerrancy statement. This isn't to draw a conclusion. It's just to give you the information, and you can just draw your own conclusions. Salvation, pretty much the same across the board, and their views on abortion, as well as their worship styles. Okay. Now let's get a little more specific, and we're going to take a look at one of the main issues that is being discussed, and that's homosexuals serving as clergy. One of the primary Bible references that comes up is 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 8 through 10. And it states that we have the law, capital L, so this is God's law, and the law is there not for righteous people. Right? If everyone was righteous, we wouldn't need the law, but it's there because we have people who need the law. And those people are the lawless and the rebellious type people. They are ungodly and sinners. They need the law. They are for the unholy and worldly type people. The law is there for those who kill their fathers and mothers. The law is there for murderers. And the law is there for the sexually immoral, homosexuals, slave traders, liars, perjurers, and whatever else is contrary to sound teaching. Romans 1, verses 26 and 27 basically says that homosexual is immoral when women abandon men for other women, and men abandon women for other men. That's immoral. And then 1 Corinthians is very similar to what's going on here in 1 Timothy, in which it says, here's a list of things that we see as sin and sexually immoral and homosexuals and whatnot, right? So it's just another list. So when we look at the UMC's stance for homosexuals serving as clergy, the qualifications are fidelity in marriage and celibacy in singleness. Sometime in the 1970s, a clause was added, or a paragraph was added, that says the practice of homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. Therefore, self-avowed practicing homosexuals are not to be certified as candidates, ordained as ministers, or appointed to serve in the United Methodist Church. And that's in paragraph 304 of the Book of Discipline, and then again in the footnotes of paragraph 310. So an argument has come up saying, if this is what we're using for the claim that homosexuality is incompatible, then why are we only saying homosexuality when there are other provisions that would prevent someone from being ordained and serving in the United Methodist Church? So that's one of the main arguments as to why certain churches, certain individuals, certain UMC representatives were asking for that provision to be removed. Is it's already clear who can be ordained and who can't. Why are we calling out one specific group of people? Now, when we look over at the GMC's stance, their qualifications include fidelity in a Christian marriage between one man and one woman, or chastity in singleness. And you can see that in paragraph 405 of their transitional book of discipline. So based off of that, it's assumed, right? We can assume that homosexual behavior would result in disqualification. They don't go to the level of identifying that specific provision to the level that the UMC has. So a footnote here is the biblical references that I'm using are the NASB translation, which is agreed upon as being the most literal word-for-word translation, and a video that explains word for word versus phrase by phrase definition versus meaning by meaning, that kind of stuff can be found here. And if I click on this real quick, kind of see that information. So over here at the far left is the NASB. Right? So this is the most literal word-for-word translation. And then the NIV is kind of right here in the middle. And then we've got the NLT, which is moving more towards the thought for thought. And then we've got the Living Bible and the Message, which is pretty much a complete like paraphrasing of the Bible, right? So that's that information. Now in 2019, there was a special session of the General Conference that met, and a vote was cast as to whether or not this paragraph should be left in the Book of Discipline or removed from the Book of Discipline. And in that vote, 53% voted in favor of retaining that language. And that was what became known as the traditional plan, that we're going to leave that language in the Book of Discipline. 47% opposed keeping that language in the Book of Discipline and voted to have it removed. Now, the important thing here to understand is if we look over here, and this is very rudimentary, but kind of at least helps with the idea. The red are the U.S. churches, and the gold here are the non-U.S. churches. So of the 53% that won the vote, it was primarily all of the non-U.S. churches and a minority of the U.S. churches. Of those that opposed the language and asked for it to be removed, overwhelmingly U.S. churches were asking for that to be removed. Now, the significance of this is that it's these churches, those that voted to retain the language, that have decided to start the Global Methodist Church and leave the United Methodist Church. So the departure of these churches that supported the traditional plan then reduces the pool of future votes in favor of retaining that language. So when statements and claims such as the United Methodist Church is going to become this, they're going to move to a more progressive platform or whatnot, it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy as those who were in favor of keeping the traditional plan decide to leave. So it's just something to keep in mind. Ready to Harvest did a couple of videos. Early 2020 did a video where he talked about the Global Methodist Church and what's kind of driving this new denomination, the start of this new denomination. And then just in January of 2023, he did an update to that and kind of brought us up to speed as to where things are at in terms of the UMC and its future, right? So this is his perspective on that information. So that's good information, or a couple good videos to watch. So we're going to delve just a little bit deeper now. We're going to look at some similarities and differences between these denominations as it pertains to these topics that are being discussed. So let's look at clergy are prohibited from engaging in homosexual behavior. Okay, so for the UMC, that statement can be found in paragraph 161, in paragraph 304, affirmed in paragraph 310, and then again in paragraph 2702 of the Book of Discipline. For the Global Methodist Church, clergy are prohibited from engaging in homosexual behavior is implied in paragraph 808, because it says engaging in sexual activities outside the bonds of a loving and monogamous marriage between one man and one woman, including but not limited to sexual abuse or misconduct, the use or possession of pornography, or infidelity. So those activities would prohibit you from being clergy. It doesn't specifically address homosexuality. Matter of fact, the word homosexual isn't used at all in the Transitional Book of Discipline for the Global Methodist Church. For the Free Methodist Church, homosexual intimacy is regarded as immoral, is stated in paragraph 3215. Now, if we go to the next statement, marriage is between one man and one woman. That's affirmed in the United Methodist Church Book of Discipline in paragraph 161, and again in the footnotes of paragraph 312. In the Global Methodist Church, it's twice, paragraph 202 and 405, and for the Free Methodist, it's in there twice in paragraph 3215 and 3311. The next statement, clergy are prohibited from performing homosexual weddings. That is explicitly stated in paragraph 341, subpoint 6. The Global Methodist Church is silent on the topic, but presumed to be prohibited based on the qualified marriage statements listed above. So just as the others state that marriage is between one man and one woman, we can assume that homosexual weddings are prohibited. And then for the Free Methodists, clergy are prohibited from performing same-sex and same-gender couples' weddings for them, and that's in paragraph 3311. So what are some of the main differences then, if we have a lot of these similarities? Well, one thing is how they look at bishops. So we're looking at that governance process. So for the United Methodist Church, the annual conference, which is kind of your regional area, bishops are appointed for life, but they have a retirement age of 68. For jurisdictional bishops, then they normally serve 1 to 2 years, and those terms are 4-year terms, so between 4 to 8 years for them. For the GMC, bishops will have term limits, although not yet codified, but in this article from the Wesleyan Covenant Association, which is the group that initially split from the United Methodist Church to begin the Global Methodist Church, they propose a term limit of 12 years. So the big thing here is that they don't like the fact that bishops are appointed for life. But when you look at what in practicality that means, is that unless someone is appointed a bishop in their 30s or 40s, which I don't know is the practice. If someone is, once they've established themselves, maybe they're in their mid 50s, and they get appointed to be a bishop, well, 13 years later, if they're 55, they're going to turn 68. So I don't know that the time difference is all that substantial. Maybe it could be for an individual or two, but for all practical purposes, it doesn't look like there's much of a difference there. The Free Methodist Church, they do have term limits of 4 years. Okay, and then for clergy, for the United Methodist Church, the clergy are guaranteed appointments once they are ordained into the church. For the Global Methodist Church, there is no guaranteed appointments. And then for the Free Methodist Church, they're not guaranteed. And if they go 2 years without being appointed, then they are returned to lay status. And that's referenced in paragraph 5600 of the Book of Discipline. And when we look at the financial information, so we have apportionments, or for the Global Methodist Church, they're going to prefer to call it connectional funding. To kind of do an apples to apples, I'm looking at apportionments due as compared to offering receipts that are expected for the year. Although the United Methodist Church, each conference can kind of do their own rules on this, I believe. I know for our conference, it's more based off of expenses than it is offerings, but as a nonprofit, then usually your offerings and your expenses are pretty close. So again, to do apples to apples, we're looking at $26,124 is the 2023 apportionments for the church, and then the budget for anticipated revenue or offerings, $295,500, right? Which is we're looking at about 8.84% of the offering would go towards apportionments. For the Global Methodist Church, they're looking at starting in 2024 for new churches that come in, 6.5%. They have a lower rate for 2022 and 2023 to help with some cost recovery stuff, but starting in 2024, it'll be up to the full rate of 6.5. Now, the Free Methodist Church, I wasn't able to find what their apportionment process was. The next area here, we have the United Methodist Church data and resources. So this is just some information that is UMC leaning, right? So this is stuff that would be those are advocating for the United Methodist Church. So there is a fact sheet. There is an article. There's some different articles that are published for those that are encouraging people to consider staying. There are some videos here. So this first one, informational interview on remaining UMC, this is the UMC side of the two interviews that I mentioned earlier in the table, right? So there's the informational interview on remaining UMC, and then when we get down to the GMC, there'll be one that says informational interview on remaining or on transitioning to GMC or something along those lines. So that's two sides of the same interview. And then we have videos for the UMC. That includes this series that a pastor for the UMC named Adam Hamilton published, and those videos are in response to some videos made by a pastor, Rob Renfro, and those Rob Renfro videos will be linked down in the GMC. So it's a little bit of a back and forth, right? So there's somebody making a claim and somebody responding to that claim. So that kind of gives you some perspective there. And then this next area is where I did a strengths, weakness, opportunities, threats, a SWOT analysis, and kind of started looking at some of those internal, external pros and cons. So for staying with the UMC, a strength would be there's no additional out-of-pocket funds needed. There's no bill to pay in order to remain. And another one would be to remain a part of a very large U.S. denomination. So from what I heard, estimates are that around 10% or so of UMC churches could leave to be part of the GMC. So if there's 30,000 U.S. churches and 3,000 to 4,000 of them leave, we're still looking at a 26,000 to 27,000 church denomination in the U.S. that would remain UMC. A weakness for any small church or local church, when there's question of people not being happy and wanting to leave, then there's always the question of the church's financial stability, right? External opportunity would be for the church to be recognized as a local church for those that are displaced because their church, maybe in another town or whatever, has switched to the GMC and they didn't want that. So it could attract some people to come to the church for that reason. And a threat would be that the denomination could shift to a more inclusive language rather than kind of saying, okay, well, we're going to remove that statement, but our practices are what they are. We're not changing anything. If they move to a more inclusive language and position, well, that could be a threat because some people could then become uncomfortable with that. And then if a large number of churches leave, then apportionments, may have to be looked at, and that the formula may have to be revised based off of the number of churches that remain. On the GMC side of things, same setup here. So we've got some articles. We've got a nearby church that voted, and they have determined to disaffiliate with the UMC and go to the GMC. So here's the letter that they wrote to their congregation and their pastor's blog as he was kind of leading his church through that process. And then some videos. So here's that partner interview. Then we've got 10 reasons to consider, and then we've got the UMC divide. If you watch this one, this is one where I think she starts it out saying, hey, I'm just hoping to provide some information. But as you listen and she goes along, this is the one where she makes a claim that the UMC could very well become a church where, and she makes those claims, right, where you don't have to believe in Jesus, you don't have to believe in the Bible, you don't have to, you can abandon all really Christian beliefs and you'll be part of the UMC. So she's obviously GMC leaning. So that's why I placed it under here. But this doesn't mean there's not good data in there, but just understand that that's the bias that she's coming from. And then here's where we have that Rob Renfro series, and the Adam Hamilton response was above. Going through the SWOT analysis for leaving the UMC, strength would be if your church decided, or our church decided, to go to the GMC, then at least initially there would be lower apportionments. Again, they're only at 6.5%. The bishop term limits may allow for fresh ideas and renewal of the individual. Again, if we're assuming that that on the UMC side of things that they're getting put into bishop positions relatively young. And then the appointment process can assist with ineffective pastors. Since they're not guaranteed an appointment, then it's one mechanism that the denomination would have to make sure that the pastors are effective in how they lead their churches. On the weakness side, there's a high out-of-pocket fund need to disaffiliate. So that local church, the next town over, $524,000 was the cost that they would need to pay in order to disaffiliate, and that covers administrative type things, right? There's liabilities for pension funds and all that kind of stuff that has to be resolved and brought up to date in order to disaffiliate. And the question has come up, well, what if we just don't pay it? Well, that's the trust clause, where the deed to the property is held in trust until those types of bills are paid, and then you get ownership. Another weakness, again, Highland Hope's financial stability. If we leave the UMC, just like if we stayed in the UMC, there's always this question of financial viability, and then unclear how the clergy appointments would work under a new denomination. Opportunities. So instead of being attractive to those whose church left the UMC, if we left the UMC as well, then there might be some local people that weren't happy under the UMC that would come back. And then threats would be that the denomination could shift to more exclusive language. Certain peoples would be unwelcome. And another one might be that the denomination is still in development, both theologically and financially. Right, so there's a lot of uncertainty in a new denomination. So things to think about. So the first thing is, what initially led you to worship at, and insert the name of your church, right? What brought you there in the first place? And then, what has changed since that initial decision? What has changed in your church since you first made that decision? The next question is, if your church was no longer affiliated with the UMC, which denomination would you choose? Right? So there's a lot in the news that people are leaving the UMC to go to the GMC, but that's not the only choice, as stated in that table. All right, what is it theologically? What aspects of that denomination's beliefs and policies have led you to that decision? Because there are differences. Is the Wesleyan Church a better fit? Is the Free Methodist Church a better fit? Again, the United Methodist Church has not split, and now there's the United Methodist Church and the Global Methodist Church. The Global Methodist Church is just a group of churches that have said, we don't like what's going on over there. We no longer want to wait for resolution. We're going to just leave. So what is it about their denomination that is leading you to make the decision to affiliate with them? Or is there another denomination that better aligns with your beliefs and understanding of the Bible? Under that, these are questions and answers that basically pertain to our annual conference. The bishop of our annual conference has conducted some Q&As, and these are the results and just a snapshot of questions and answers that I thought were relevant. There are pages and pages of them, and they're all linked here. But the bottom line has to do with whether or not a church needs to vote right now. So, and this is where, towards the top, I said some churches feel pressure. So yes, the Book of Discipline has a provision where a church can disaffiliate, and that expires at the end of 2023. However, the General Conference hasn't decided on anything yet, so therefore, to disassociate in 2023 would be doing so not knowing what the United Methodist Church is going to do. Is it going to maintain that traditional viewpoint? Is it going to remove it and do something different? Or is it going to officially split into two denominations? Right, so that's yet to be decided. And in the question and answer exercise done here, the bishop is asking for people to be patient and understand that considerations will be made, but they can't be made until the General Conference convenes, which doesn't occur until 2024. So on one side, there's, no, we're going to do it now because we can't trust that we can do it later. Even if we don't have all of the information, we're making a decision now. And on the other side is, no, trust us. We're going to make this work for everybody. Just give us time and let's clarify the situation before anybody makes any decision. So that's might help with reading through these Q&As. That concludes all the information that I have compiled. Hopefully you found that somewhat helpful. And again, you can visit the URL that I provided that will give you access to this file, where you can click on any of those links. You can read the articles, you can view their websites, you can read the books of disciplines, you can watch the videos. And the main thing is that you're looking at the right information to make an educated decision and not just listening to somebody trying to sell you something, right? Not just listening to what other people want you to hear. Go to the source, look at the source documents, and understand the basic underlying issues and draw your own conclusions. So once again, thanks for your time, and best wishes to you.